Good afternoon. Welcome to Burning Issues. This is a contemporary current affairs program that we do every week on IETV. We need to talk about some of the issues that affect our citizens in Trinidad and Tobago, and Burning Issues try to do some of those things. Now, we can't talk about everything. There are so many issues. Every day it's a different issue, and within a week we have so many issues piling on to us that we cannot deal with everything, but we try and deal with some of the main ones, some that affect and impact upon most of our citizens. So we try to come every Tuesday afternoon, and we repeat the show on a Thursday and on a Sunday. Hopefully you'll be able to join us, and we hope that in the not too distant future we'll probably be going live later in the evening so that people could join us and have their say on some of these issues also as we carry on the conversations on burning issues. So today, April the 19th, what are the burning issues today? Well, of course, the big issue today, the big seller, school has reopened. School has reopened for all students at all levels. Yes, but the problem with it is simply, are we ready? And I say this, are we ready, from various perspectives. Are we ready from the perspectives of the school, the infrastructure, the buildings, the furniture, and so on? Tutor has expressed their concern that they don't think that we are ready. But apart from Tutor, there are other people who are concerned too as to whether or not the ministry has provided enough sanitizing equipment and supplies and so forth, and whether the buildings are in good condition, bearing in mind that they have been closed in some instances for 2 years. So we now have to ask ourselves the question, are the schools ready, and to what extent are they ready? So that is one of the issues that we're going to have to touch on a little bit later in the show. But apart from the schools and the infrastructure, there's also that concern from parents. Now, the children may be a little bit more excited to at least go back into school, start back the process of learning. But there are apprehensions by parents. So for instance, can some parents afford to send their children to school? Unfortunately, yesterday I happened to see 2 or 3 parents actually stating that they could not be sure when they could send their children to school simply because they did not have the resources to supply their children with the requirements to go to school today. And in fact, one parent was saying that probably in May. I'm not sure I could send them out in April. So I might have to keep them home for another 2 weeks until I get enough money to at least get the supplies required for schools. So that's one aspect of it. And then there's the other aspect of it as to whether or not COVID is over. Well, COVID is not over. While on Sunday we would have celebrated 0 persons have died, yesterday we went back up to 3. So COVID is not over. And more importantly, as we come out of the vacation period, and now that a lot of places are open, we expect that there will be some degree of an uptick in COVID cases. How that will impact upon us and upon our society, we really have to wait and see, but that is one of the things. And of course, there's always Tobago. I mean, last year for Easter, we had the Tobago bash, and then we came back with a rise in COVID cases. We know in Trinidad and Tobago this time around, this year around, that we've been told that probably about 60,000 people are visiting Tobago for the Easter vacation. And when they return to Trinidad, whether or not that would cause some degree of an uptick. We've seen shots in the media, photos in the media, where people were partying in Tobago without masks, without the caution that one would have expected as we are in a pandemic. But that's where we are. So COVID is not over. And schools are reopened, and we're going to hope that the children are able to get the education that they deserve. But what is the other big ticket seller for today? Well, gas prices have gone up. Diesel prices have gone up. And the point about it here is simply one which says that as of midnight last night, consumers would have to pay more. And there's that concern as to whether or not that will impact negatively on the cost of goods and services throughout the country. Of course, we know any rise in the price of gas or diesel would impact upon the traveling public as well as the suppliers of goods and services. And that is the context in which we now have to ask ourselves, will there be a further rise in prices? And we'll really have to wait and see how that turns out. We'll talk about that and the inflation. Of course, the central bank and the CSO is also reporting rise in inflation. 4% I think it was in February alone. And we could very well expect that there will be further increases in inflation. And we'll need to talk about that. And we'll talk, hopefully during the conversations today, with Dr. Gokul, Rebecca Gokul, on some of those economic challenges that the citizens really will face. So we have had the rise in prices, and we expect further rise in prices. But as the Minister of Finance would have said, nobody has rioted. When he raised gas prices on the last 3 occasions, and he seemingly has risen gas prices again. And apart from a handful of people who are protesting, or who have protested this morning at various locations across the country, there's no real impact upon or cause for concern as to whether or not people are going to protest en masse about the rise in gas prices. But that is one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is those protests, some people have alluded to it as being political in nature. Well, of course, yes, it is. The UNC has been one of those groups that have, or organizations which have organized protests. And so too we have heard about the PEP saying that they too were calling on people to stay off the roads today. We know the PDP in Tobago has also said that it is the wrong time for increase in gas prices, as well as the MSJ. But of course the government has pressed ahead and the price of fuel has gone up. The question is, however, what does that do for the politics of Trinidad and Tobago? And we're going to talk politics a little bit today too on the show as we deal with the growth in new political parties, or the realignment of political parties, and what does that say for Trinidad and Tobago and for our politics as we move forward in the rest of this year, particularly so as we have a local government election that is due towards the end of the year or early next year. So with that in mind, we're going to take a break now, and we're going to come back and start with the politics, and then we'll go to the economics on where are we going in Trinidad and Tobago. We take a break now on burning issues and come back. Join me after the break. Welcome to Burning Issues on IETV. Burning Issues is a contemporary show that is going to be dealing with current affairs. While we talk about the pandemic, while we talk about the issues of health, crime, be it public utilities, be it taxation, be it the economy, how we diversify. It is now for us to talk about these issues, and this we will be talking with in the show for the next few weeks on IETV with Dr. Mandrika Bahal and I, Vishnu Raghunath. We talk burning issues.
Are you interested in becoming a news reporter? IETV Newsroom is offering internships. Send your resume to news@itvtt.com.
Welcome back to Burning Issues. We're talking about the politics, we're talking about the society. And one of the things that we talked about, or we said in the introduction, was simply that in Trinidad and Tobago, we've raised the price of gas on several occasions, and the people have not rioted. So we could raise it again, and we have raised it again. But that whole issue, whether the people are going to riot about the rise in price of gas, or whether it's simply a matter that people are going to accept it, is a whole concern for many people, particularly to some of the political parties. And some of the political parties, especially the younger ones, have raised their voices and said, well, they told the government that this is not the right time for a rise in the price of gas. People have gone through a pandemic, suffered a lot, businesses have suffered, and is this the right time? And the question is there ever a right time to increase prices and remove subsidies? Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit later as to the impact of the subsidies or the lack of the subsidies. But I want to start with Dr. Shane Mohammed, who is my guest today on Burning Issues, to talk a little bit about the development of the politics and the political parties in Trinidad and Tobago, particularly so within the last few years. Now, traditionally, Trinidad and Tobago has been a two-party state. So third parties never had or made that great of an impression. For third parties to make an impression, they had to align themselves with another bigger party, one of the two parties, and thereupon take it forward. So, for instance, we had the NAR in 1986, which was a coming together of the ULF in those days, and the ONR, and several other smaller parties. Then we had in 2007, we had the COP, but the COP didn't make an impact, and it was not until 2010 when they aligned themselves with the UNC that they were able to make an impact in the elections. Now we are seeing, however, several other parties coming on the scene. And most importantly, we've seen the PDP from Tobago, led by Mr. Watson Duke, coming into Trinidad and saying, well, look, it's about time that we bring our PDP politics into Trinidad. Dr. Mohammed, welcome to Burning Issues, welcome to IETV. I know you've been on IETV before, in another incarnation on a show that I hosted. But let's talk about the PDP, and not only the PDP, the PEP, as well as the National Transformation Alliance, I think it is, by Gary Griffith. What are your views on these political parties as they enter into the political arena in Trinidad?
Thank you for having me, Dr. Raghunath. Good afternoon to everyone. I have one of my burning concerns about the introduction of all of these political parties is, and I have expressed it in my writings, and I have expressed it in a discussion with Mr. Gary Griffith. And I have expressed that there needs to be, I think all of these aspiring leaders or persons who are aspiring for change, and I would put it as aspiring for political change, they're doing their own thing. They're acting and behaving in silos, and nobody is coming together, and there's no individual that has stepped forward to unite the vision of political parties and political ideologies. So therefore, we may very well end up in a situation if nobody speaks and nobody talks to anybody and nobody sits down to have a mature discussion. We are going to be faced with the problem with 5 political parties going into a general election in 2025, and that is, in my opinion, a recipe for disaster, and it is regressive with regard to the aspiration. It negates the aspiration, I should say, for political change that we so desperately are calling for. In my writings also, I have asked and I have called for political statesmen and women to come together and sit down. And I have referenced Sir Arthur Lewis's consociationalism. Now, there are those who have argued that consociationalism has not succeeded in Trinidad and Tobago. And I argue that consociationalism has not succeeded in Trinidad and Tobago because it has been overshadowed and overpowered by individualism and the personal agendas and personal aspirations of those who have what I would have said, what I would categorize as were the framers of the consociational framework. So what we need in Trinidad and Tobago, moving towards 2025, is a change in, if you want change, and if these leaders are aspiring for change, then they need to first change their approach. And the approach is they can't afford to operate in silos, because taking into consideration the 2007 general election results, that is what is going to be the outcome.
So basically what you're saying, Shane, is simply that what these political parties have to do now is simply to find a mechanism that will allow them to form some sort of accommodation or coalition that will allow them to work together against the PNM for one, and to some extent the UNC?
Yes, because I actually, I think Dr. Fuad can put it very nicely. He said, why can't we come together and have a platform of national unity? And it reminds me very much of Bastille Pandey's call for national unity in 1995. Now, I don't believe Trinidad and Tobago is extremely too small for political parties to have extreme differentiations and different ideologies and political philosophies. And their core values cannot be so different that they cannot come together and agree with one another on certain, and give way and come to what you have described as an accommodation. I believe that they can more than maintain their identities and more than also express their philosophies and their ideologies in a very, if it's very well communicated and a very cohesive manner.
Okay, so let me just take that one step further. Now, you said that as we prepare for 2025, of course, before 2025, in 2022, 2023, we are supposed to have a local government elections. And in that context, if all of these parties decide to go it alone on their own, and the result of which will clearly show that they cannot win on their own. That's the projection at this point in time. Will that be the fillip, the catalyst, by which they will be forced now to come together and at least start talking with each other if they want to make an impact on the politics in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, the thing about it is, the caveat in there is how many of these political parties are going to be focusing on the local government election and even dipping their hands into the local government election, or see the local government election as relevant to their political future in 2025. Now, taking into consideration that local government election, the most recent one in the past, has generated a very low voter turnout. I don't expect that there's going to be any change in terms of voter turnout for local government election. And I am not sure that the political parties are even focusing on the local government election. But I will agree with you that if they choose to dip their hands into the local government election, it gives them an opportunity to realize what we as the experts in political science is saying, that you can't simply just experiment with a general election and hope for the best. There has to be a greater strategy involved, and the local government election may very well be that test. I think Mr. Watson Duke may be the bravest of them all, because he's bold and he's vociferous and he's hungry for this change. He has expressed that. I would love to see how much of how many candidates that he's able to put forward and make an impact. If he is able to make an impact, my question would be to him, who would then be your prime ministerial candidate in 2025?
Well, that is a way off for the time being. But I would also know that Mr. Philip Alexander has indicated that the PEP will be contesting the local government polls come 2022, 2023. So I am expecting that both the PEP and the PDP to throw their hats into the ring. Now, as to whether they will contest all the seats or whether they will contest some of the seats, we really have to wait and see. But for all intents and purposes, if we get these two new entities coming into the political arena, that in itself will tell us that clearly there is a degree of concern amongst at least the leadership of those parties. We'll then have to look and see what would be the outcome of the poll as to what is the support base of both parties in the Trinidad environment. We know for a fact that, for instance, the PDP has been, sorry, not the PDP, the PEP has been beating its chest and boasting that they came second in the Debe by-election, which was held not too long ago, and they were able to beat the PNM. And whether that is any measure that could be used or metric that could be used to determine how much support they have, we'll really have to wait and see. But clearly, that is one of the concerns. But I come back to one of the bigger concerns here. And one of the bigger concerns here is simply one which says that we have, let's go back to the big parties, the PNM and the UNC. The PNM won the last general election, and in fact, they had a two-seat majority or three-seat majority. And in that context, they would have said that we are ahead. However, with the PDP coming into Tobago and taking the THA structure and institution, there's that concern now that the PNM could very well lose the 2 Tobago seats in a general election. If the PNM loses those 2 seats in a general election, then that now puts us in a very much so very thin edge of success that they would have had to maintain in Trinidad if they are to remain in government. The UNC, on the other hand, have said that, all we need to do is win 2 seats, and we could take government. And clearly, if the PDP could take 2 seats away from the PNM, then it makes our job even much more easier. In that context of our political scenario, how do you see us going ahead in terms of the 2 major parties, the UNC and the PNM, and what would their strategies be as they move into the next election?
Dr. Ragnat, I don't believe that that is something that is the academics in me and the academia in me does not resonate with me whatsoever. I see that as political cupping out. I see that as political laziness. It irritates me to the extent where you are confident that we just need to win 2 seats. The question that I would have to ask the UNC is, which 2 seats do you believe you need to win, and how do you intend to win these 2 seats? I note that they've made Anil Roberts the coordinator of the St. Joseph constituency, and Anil Roberts is not popular with the people, and I don't believe he's going to be able to resonate with the people of St. Joseph, and that's a very ticklish and a very, very technical seat that you need to find the right choice of candidates that is able to resonate and relate to the population and the people who vote in that constituency. That's one. Then you were the UNC was unable to capture a seat that they worked for 2 years, which is the La Hoqueta Talparo seat. And they put one of their major fighters in that seat, and she lost. What has the UNC done in the last year, the last 2 years, to engender public confidence that they are capable of winning a general election? And it will not be what I would like to say, what I would like to describe as a revolving door, much like the jails that exist. That's one. Two, I believe that the PDP is a very strong-minded party. And listening to Mr. Watson Duke when he opened his barraterial office, he was very clear. And I warned in a comment to the Trinidad Guardian, I believe, that political leaders have to be very strategic and be very careful in making hardline pronunciations and pronouncements at this stage of the political game, because it's still early and a lot can change within a matter of weeks, days, months. Basil Pandey has said a day in politics is like a lifetime. So we may be going good tomorrow and something catastrophic happens in the world that sends us into a financial shock that is greater than Ukraine versus Russia. Then what then? Mia Mottley, when she was appointed chairman of CARICOM, and she was also responsible for the integration process of CSME, she said that Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Suriname were ideal to become the breadbaskets of the region because we are directly out of the hurricane belt. She has long passed her tenure as chairmanship. It passed to Dr. Rowley, and I believe now it is in Antigua and Barbuda. Question: did Trinidad and Tobago make any progress in its diversification mandate? From a CARICOM perspective, the answer to that question is no. So, I know I am diverting a little bit, and I'm diverting because our leaders, the primary leaders in this country, be it the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition, somehow are not listening. They are not listening. They are not paying attention to what is happening across the Caribbean. Why was President Santoki able to oust his opponent after 20 years in Suriname? Why was Prime Minister Holness able to win such a great landslide majority in Jamaica? The same applies to Prime Minister Mottley, who very strategically called a snap election when she realized that her government was on the verge of collapse because there was an internal coup plan. So all of these factors has to be relevant to the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. And whether Dr. Rowley wants to say he's the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago and he is not concerned with Guyana, the issue is not about being concerned about Guyana. It is about what are the strategies, the political strategies that the Guyanese president, the Bajan Prime Minister, and the Jamaican Prime Minister has used today and has brought into the political fray that Trinidad and Tobago seems to lack. And the same applies to Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar. Now, we have to also consider that both parties are facing internal elections in the next year or so. And Dr. Rowley has said that he has plans to return as political leader. I don't believe that he's going to return as Prime Minister. He may very well run the race as Prime Minister and political leader up until a particular period of time, and very well hand over to someone who is more popular and who he believes is able to beat a UNC candidate. And when we look at the UNC is very fractured, very divided, and there seems to be no real mechanisms or plans to heal the fractures of that party in the last 10 years. We could say in the last 10 years, from 2010 to 2020, and we're now in 2022. So where are we going? We now have Gary Griffith with his new political party. We now have Justice Volney with the Justice and Freedom Party. Now, the difference between those two political parties that are new is that Justice Volney is putting out on social media, and he's utilizing social media very strategically to outline what the JFP represents, what is its philosophy. He has indicated that it will be promulgated in May, and then the party will be officially launched in May 2023. And he's not going to be the political leader, but all of the positions that are going to be up for election, and that he intends to simply be the catalyst for the JFP. Now, the opposite is that Mr. Griffith, while I believe that he has a great amount of popularity, why do we have political parties being formed by persons who have the capacity to come together and put aside differences? If you really care for this country, and if people really care for the people and the people that are struggling in this country, and there's a great cross-section of this country population that is suffering from poverty and are struggling to put meals on their table and wondering where their next paycheck is coming from. If you really care about the social ills that are affecting our country now and may be in the future, then I believe the educated men like Herbert Volney and Gary Griffith and Fuad Khan and Vasan Bharat, and women like Lindira Udit and Nikhila Pandey and Nan Ram Ghulam and others can more than come together, and Carolyn Sipasad Bechan and Wendy Lien and all of these women and men could come together and sit around a table and decide a way forward that meets. And I will add Watson Duke in there as well, because he is a critical aspect of this entire thing. They can more than come together on a platform for national unity and rescue the country and wrestle it out of the hands of the PNM and also the UNC, because the UNC, a lot of it, the UNC's base is now mature, and a lot of what they were holding on to is now very educated, and the children of that base are looking for a political alternative. So there's much to look at and observe and to comment on from the perspective of national politics in a holistic manner.
Will we take a break now? Okay, so thank you for that, Shane. What we need to do, and before I go to a break, I want to ask you one last question before I talk about the Caribbean aspect of it, and I'm glad you brought in the challenges with Guyana. But in terms of the PNM, can we focus on the PNM by itself? Is the PNM as strong as it was 5 years ago or 7 years ago, in light of the fact that we have the declining economic situation, the challenges of COVID and everything else that went, and more importantly, at the rate at which we go in, the government will have very little option. Notwithstanding all that the Minister of Finance is saying, the economy does not seem to be as rosy as he would like to make it out to be. And that in itself could have significant negative impact on supporters of the PNM. So let me ask you on your take on where's the PNM as at this point in time, and what does the PNM need to do to ensure that it holds on to power at the next general election?
I will say this, Dr. Raghunath. If an election were to be held in 5 weeks from now, the PNM will win again. And the PNM is going to win again because the PNM does not operate, and I have great respect for them. Their governance is not the best, I will say that. Their governance from 2015 to now has not been the very best. In fact, it has declined, and it has failed to meet the expectations of all of us, for the entire population at every level. What the PNM has is a very, very well-oiled political machinery in terms of its internal structures, processes, procedures, and they have very good political strategy. Political strategy does not coincide, and there's no correlation from this government with regard to their governance and how they go about governing the country and managing our affairs. If you were to put them on the ground in an election, they would beat the UNC. Now, I will also go a step further, that there are personalities that are very well placed by Dr. Rowley within the PNM structure that makes the PNM very much a viable option in 2025 if men fail to do their job and sit down and talk. And if the UNC fails to put its house in order in a cohesive manner and in a very progressive and redefinition and a serious retreat that redefines them. And I can call the personalities, and they are the future leaders of the party. You have the Brian Mannings, you have the Amy Browns, you have the Penelope Beckles. Those are just three. You have the Randall Mitchell, and then you have those that are sitting. You have Senator, the PRO of the PNM, who is sitting in the Senate.
Lisa Morris.
Yes, you have. I loved the message from Education Minister Gatsby Dolly that came out last night. You have Lisa Julian Morris. You have all of these persons that are sitting and doing their jobs, and they are viable options for senior positions within the political structure of the party. So you can see that there is some level of succession beyond Rowley and Imbert and Al-Rawi and Fitzgerald Hines and Camille Robinson Regis. So there is a long-term vision. There is visuals, and you can quote from our perspectives as political scientists. You can see what the future holds for the PNM. That gives them the advantage, and very much an advantage that can take us into the future progressively. Can I say that about the UNC? The answer to that question is no. There are too many questions that are hanging over the heads of potential leaders or leader of the UNC. And there are also very unattractive personalities inside the UNC as it stands right now that does not make it competitive enough to beat the PNM in a new dynamic as I just outlined.
Okay, so we'll continue this conversation after a short break on burning issues. We'll come back. Please stay with us and join us after the break.
Are you interested in becoming a news reporter? ITV Newsroom is offering internships. Send a resume to news@itvtt.com.
Welcome to Burning Issues on IETV. Burning Issues is a contemporary show that is going to be dealing with current affairs. While we talk about the pandemic, while we talk about the issues of health, crime, be it public utilities, be it taxation, be it the economy, how we diversify. It is now for us to talk about these issues, and this we will be talking with in the show for the next few weeks on IETV with Dr. Mandrika Bahal and I, Vishnu Raghunath. We talk burning issues. Welcome back to Burning Issues. And we're talking politics today. We're talking about with Dr. Shane Mohammed, political scientist. And basically, we're talking about local politics and where are we going in our local politics. But Dr. Mohammed raised several critical concerns as he made his presentations earlier. And one of his concerns was simply, where are we going with CARICOM? Is Trinidad and Tobago toeing the line of CARICOM, or is CARICOM going ahead without Trinidad and Tobago? One of the concerns that was raised recently, for instance, and we've had the complaints, we had several complaints about what is happening with Trinidad and Tobago's relationship with CARICOM. So for instance, Dr. Rowley was invited to attend the energy conference hosted by Guyana. He declined that invitation to go to Qatar instead for another energy meeting. Then too, there was that concern raised as to the Guyana government saying that they wanted to ensure food sustainability for the Caribbean region. And in a way, there was that feeling that the Trinidad and Tobago government gave that a lukewarm, if not a cold reception. Dr. Mohammed, in terms of where we're going in CARICOM, is Trinidad and Tobago still seen as critical in where we're going in CARICOM, particularly so since Mia Mottley and the Guyana president, and you have said it too, even the Jamaican Prime Minister, seem to be heading in directions that seemingly are leaving Trinidad and Tobago out?
Well, the thing about it is, Dr. Raghunath, I have had issues with CARICOM as a whole. I believe that CARICOM needs to do the same thing, and I have, when I was at the University of the West Indies, I taught the same perspective I share now, that CARICOM is very old at this stage, and we are still operating under what I will call the constitution of CARICOM, which is the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. But the thing is, CARICOM, like the United Nations, has not reformed itself. It has not given itself teeth, and it has not. CARICOM leaders have failed to address critical aspects of CARICOM that would make us even more cohesive and more relevant in the international space. So, for example, we logged heads. We felt offended. I personally took offense to the comments of the vice president of Guyana, because he, of all persons, came to Trinidad and Tobago cap in hand and approached Trinidad and Tobago for loans under both the Manning and Pandey administrations, which were given because at that point in time, Trinidad and Tobago had very heavy coffers. And to now turn around and bite that hand that fed you, because it is no secret that Trinidad and Tobago also wrote off the debt that Guyana had owed us as a sign of goodwill. I think it is not appropriate in the CARICOM context for leaders to be throwing banter or making statements that will offend our people, not necessarily offend the leadership. It will offend our people. And, you know, we have to take into consideration the social aspect of this thing called CARICOM. And how have we developed CSME? How have we moved forward with regard to our mandates? We've not. A simple thing that we have not done is that CARICOM has not made a decision that pushes all members of CARICOM to subscribe to the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final appellate court. And the Caribbean Court of Justice has been in existence since 2005. That's one major flaw of CARICOM, right? We have had, the CARICOM heads of government is simply a meet and greet and discuss and leave. It is money spent on hosting prime ministers in different countries without any end result. There's no means to the end. It is simply a mini vacation where people talk, they laugh, they shake hands. Some people have their side meetings and they come with their own bilateral agreements. But from a holistic approach, no, to answer your question, Trinidad and Tobago has lost its prestige. Trinidad and Tobago is losing its relevance, not only in CARICOM, but it's losing its relevance in the other organizations that we are part of, like ACS and ACP and all the others. Why? Because our government has not placed on the front burner as a facet of importance our foreign policy and where we stand regarding foreign relations. This government has only focused on one thing as it pertains to foreign relations and foreign policy, and that has been COVID-19. And COVID-19 seems to have overshadowed our government's ability to be multifaceted and to be able to operate in a multitask way. So there are ministers that are holding portfolios that have been warming seats and been on pause. For example, I have questioned what is the relevance of the Minister of Trade and Industry. I have questioned what is the relevance of the Minister of Tourism, Culture and the Arts. I have asked, what is the plan for Trinidad and Tobago in a post-COVID pandemic period for tourism, arts, and the culture? Is there a plan? What has happened? Why have we failed to go out into the world? And why has Minister Paulo Gopi-Spoon been, why has she paused in her mandate to bring investors into Trinidad and Tobago? The world, yes, the entire world has suffered from COVID-19, but they have not allowed COVID-19 to prevent them from governing their country in an effective manner and in a progressive manner.
So in a way, what you're saying is that the government has used COVID-19 as a good excuse, a convenient excuse, to not do all the things that they should have done. And more importantly, that they have allowed governance and the strategies and the priorities of the government to lapse, whereupon they should have been very much more proactive rather than simply being reactive. And that has left us in dire straits, literally.
Yes, it has left us very plateaued. And you would know in political philosophy, when we reach the plateau, we either go up or we can fall off the cliff. And I think that Trinidad and Tobago has reached the place where we have plateaued. so much so that we are on the edge of the cliff, not to go up, but to go down. How do we prevent ourselves from falling off that cliff in this state of being plateaued depends on those alternative leaders doing the right thing. And doing the right thing is sitting down and having a conversation that, and this is not just one conversation, but this is like a conference of conversations that will take us forward. And I would not say that the government has used COVID-19 as an excuse. I think what the government has showed is that it's incapable of multitasking and effecting good governance as a result in a multifaceted manner and in a holistic manner effectively.
And in that context, and this is where I come back to the issue with CARICOM, other leaders in the CARICOM region have shown a different type of mettle. So for instance, you talk about Mia Mottley, you talk about President Ifran Mohamed from Guyana, and they have shown a totally different type of mettle in how they deal with things. And in fact, I mean, while you may disagree with the comments of Bharat Jagdeo, my take on him was simply, he was not literally bad talking Trinidad and throwing stones at Trinidad, but rather he was guiding his own people to say, we have to be prepared, that we have to diversify and make sure that we are prepared for whatever eventualities will come along. Unlike Trinidad, which still seems to have been putting all their eggs in the energy basket, and until the last budget that we had, continue to put their eggs into the energy basket. And my concern is simply, we are not going anywhere. We have not yet diversified. And that is the context in which now I am thinking whether or not we, other leaders in the region, Mia Mottley again, I start with her, I follow with the President of Guyana, to some extent the Prime Minister of Jamaica, and ask, are they the ones who are leading us, and who should, well, this is where our government will really have to come into play and decide whether or not they want to be part and parcel of some arrangement with these other leaders in the region to make Trinidad and Tobago, at least to return Trinidad and Tobago to some level where we could go forward in a positive way.
The thing about it is, I think that I will say that I really believe that the Guyanese people have very little to worry about because they didn't discard the agrarian system. They did not discard and move away from the agrarian industry, and they have a host of wealth there that they have in storage. I will say they have kept abreast with their rice industry, their sugar industry, their mining industry. They still have the price of gold is very high now, and now they have oil. Now Trinidad and Tobago, we only have gas, and the few discoveries by Touchstone has given us a glimmer of hope, but that glimmer of hope is not enough to take us into the level of prosperity that Guyana can reach in a matter of a year or two. And the leadership of the region is being led by Prime Minister Mia Mottley. And she's doing it not because, she's doing it because it has happened because of her vision for Barbados. She has made every single international news network. She's done all of the major international interviews that one can aspire to sit on. And she has gone on to, she went to the climate change conference at which the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago was present and spoke. But it was as if he was not there because Prime Minister Mia Mottley stole the entire show from all the other leaders, including the leaders of the G7 and G20. And that is because of her ability to communicate effectively and communicate with, I will say now, the world in a way that is very relatable and very realistic. She does not have an air of arrogance to her. And even if that air of arrogance exists, she knows very well how to manage it. The thing about it is the Jamaican Prime Minister is seeing growth. Imagine the Jamaican government is seeing growth in its economic development in the time of COVID. So has the Guyanese government, so has the Bajan government, and Trinidad and Tobago is left simply stagnated. We are still depending heavily on oil and gas. We have not walked the talk of getting into renewable energy. We have not done anything to revitalize the heritage and what I will call Petrotrin. We have not looked towards developing the rice industry. We have not looked at anything from a short, medium, and long-term perspective from 2015 to now. The last 7 years, we have not done anything that, in my opinion, shows good governance. It has showed bad governance, bad leadership on the part of the Prime Minister. And I'm not saying that Dr. Rowley is a bad person, but his leadership from the perspective as a Prime Minister is poor, and it lacks. His governance strategy is what is lacking. His political strategy is what is strong. So he has an imbalance in his leadership.
So what you're saying here is politics outweighs governance, and in Trinidad and Tobago, that is the basis upon which the PNM will remain in power, because politics simply overshadows everything else.
And I also would go a step further to say that I believe he has been distracted from his role as Prime Minister and leader of the government, because he has also been managing COVID-19 by his Minister of Health simply as a figurehead. I can tell you, because I have on good ground, that there has been many, during the period of COVID, the Prime Minister has been faced in cabinet by a group of ministers coming to him saying that the current Minister of Health was a liability to the government and should be removed. And that is why we saw the Prime Minister of this country taking a direct involvement in his utterances in terms of policy, in terms of where we go with COVID. And we have also seen him manage the Minister of Health on national television during their press conference. So we have also played politics with COVID-19, and we have had a minister that has really and truly he's been a liability, is what I will say, and a liability that added more pressure and unnecessary pressure to the strains of the technocrats, the chief medical officer, and also having the Prime Minister shadow him and manage him. That has also added to our lack of good governance and a way forward and our strategy to prosperity.
We will have to leave it there, Shane, for today. I mean, we've run out of time, but clearly I think you've put on the table a lot more issues. In fact, the liabilities within the PNM and within the government structure needs to be discussed, as well as the notion of how much bad governance are we going to take as we move into the future. This has been Burning Issues. Thank you, Dr. Shane Mohammed, for joining us today, and we will continue the conversations on Burning Issues next week on IETV. Good evening.
Better Deal Supermarket, number